So, Scotland, South Africa. This was a really interesting game, even though it was a low score and it wasn't pretty, but some really interesting things. I think the main story for me really is you could tell from basically the first play was Kinghorn taking a knock on when trying to take the ball. And this really, I think, right from the beginning kind of set a tone of what was going to happen for the rest of the game. I felt like in the first half, Scotland were crazily competitive, and I think a lot has to be said for how competitive the forward pack was against South Africa's, considering the size difference, considering Scotland's pack are good, but they're not classed at the same level as South Africa, who have probably the best pack in the world. And they were arm wrestling with South Africa for the whole of the first half, and at points they looked like they were winning the arm wrestle. They looked superb. The lineup was an issue in the first half, but the scrum was solid. They started winning penalties every now and again, and yeah. So why did it all fall apart in the second half? For me, I think it really boils down to the fact that it's depth of squad, and I think South Africa, for example, they have discussions about competition for places. Do you start Allende or Esterhazen? Do you start Willemse or Leroux at 15? If Andre Parler was healthy, would he be starting instead of Manie Libbok? There's such competition for places that it means that when they bring players on, you're not worried about changing quality of play, and Scotland don't have that. Now, why is that important for the second half? Well, because in the first half, Scotland didn't quite execute the very small amount of chances that they had to get enough points to get ahead, to be competitive when depth of squad came in as a factor for South Africa. I think that Scotland missed a couple of really key opportunities in terms of going ahead and scoring. There was, I think one of the most notable ones was Darcy Graham making his break, which was beautifully set up. He makes a breakthrough, he does a dummy pass, and in reality, there's nothing wrong with the dummy pass, but Manie Libbok makes an incredible tackle on him where he wraps the ball up and he makes the offload impossible. Now, the only way to, do that better is with hindsight in the ability to should have just passed the ball and just done the typical 3-on-1. That's one example for me where Scotland's mistake basically stopped them from just capitalising on getting the tries they needed to win the game. There were some really, Scotland are going to watch the tape, and I think there was quite a few unforced errors from their point, which when you're playing South Africa in a World Cup, you can't have any of them. You have to play perfectly. Them doing those unforced errors, it just gives South Africa an advantage in a game where they were already favourites. So it's a shame. It doesn't mean Scotland's World Cup's over by any regard. I mean, boy, was I impressed with their first half performance. To arm wrestle South Africa, play their own game against them. Whew. Wow, I mean, very impressive stuff. And their island game is going to be fascinating because they need to win that to basically go through. There's no question about it. So they'll know it's last chance saloon. Just going to go through some of the notes I made throughout the game. Again, in the first half, Scotland were getting choked of possession for a good section of it, and they almost tried to force play out of their own half, which was to their detriment. I remember a couple of specific occasions, one off a scrum, one off a ruck, where they get the ball out, and they haven't had the ball in a while, and they decided to ship it wide in their own half, and someone will end up getting isolated, and it kind of breaks down, and I think it shows just trying to force a game plan and getting frustrated that you don't have the ball in hand, especially when you're Scotland, because as Scotland, how they play, they need to build possession for Finn Russell and other players like Kinghorn to make some great runs and Darcy to be set up in the right place. They need X number of possessions or X number of phases to basically turn something into magic. They can't, if they can do it on counter attacks in one or two plays, but for something just crazy to happen, they just need to build up possession to a little bit. If you're getting 30% possession as Scotland, I don't think you're winning the game. You need to kind of build up play, get over the gain line, and then take advantage of the gaps that are revealed from that. Etzebeth coming off at 25 minutes, that's huge for South Africa. That's huge for many reasons. For example, if it's an injury that keeps him out for a couple of weeks, it really, for me, kind of puts the whole bomb squad theory, like, it's nowhere near as powerful. Snyman, for me, sensational player. I think he should be starting for South Africa, but I get why he's on the bomb squad, because he's a huge dude, he's a massive grifter, and his offload ability is just ridiculous. Like, he's so large that he can just throw the ball around the tackler and cause a gap through that. But I understand why Snyman's on the bench. He's the powerhouse that you can bring on when everyone's tired, and it means that either Franco, Mostert or Etzebeth gets a rest, and he can bludgeon oppositions down with his pure size, along with a couple of other people that could come on for South Africa in that pack. But I really think the bomb squad is the core element of that is being able to bring on Snyman himself. He's the biggest guy that they have on the bench, and if they are forced to play Mostert and Snyman for a full 80 minutes, it kind of nullifies that a little bit. Sure, there are some great props that can come on. Sure, there's some great back rowers that can come on, but I think that's a real core element of the bomb squad, in my personal opinion. So that'll be interesting to see how that goes, and hopefully Etzebeth is not injured for too long for South Africa. And I just want to reiterate that Scotland's competition in the scrum in the first half, I mean, they were starting to win penalties against South Africa, and you just know that the South Africans would not have been happy with that in any shape or form. So, man, so impressive. Oh yeah, the head-on collision. I didn't actually see this when I was watching in the first half. They went back in the commentary and they talked about it. And, well, I've talked about my opinions on these yellows and red cards. It seems like he's gone in a little bit too high. A letter of the law, that should be a red in my opinion. It is missed. If you're Scottish, you can't pin that on the reason that you didn't win the game. You had to go out and win it, and unfortunately you just didn't take your chances where you could have made them. And yeah, I have to reiterate, when the score went to about 16-3, it did start to feel like the game was kind of getting out of hand in terms of Scotland's chance. I felt like Scotland's chance to win it really diminished, like when it got to 16-3. And it's not just because it's the scoreline and it's South Africa, but it's because, like, who have you got to bring on from Scotland to change the pace, change the game plan, do something different to try and, like, break the line in a separate way? There's not really another person that they can bring on that's kind of like, well, game plan A has not worked. Now let's try game plan B. And everyone's kind of, all the starters are starting to get tired by that point. The subs start coming on for South Africa, and it just feels like there's like these three or four factors kind of build up to just massively reduce the deficit, reduce the percentage of the chance that Scotland have to win as time goes on. That on top of the fact that obviously South Africa's defence is sensational. I have to say, something that's crazy about South Africa's defence is that even the slightly smaller players, or there are small players on South Africa's team, Club obviously being one of them, none of them get run over. They're always there for the tackle. They know how to tackle bigger men than themselves, to the point where the bigger men aren't getting over the gain line as well. And it's really interesting because it means that there's no weak point defences. Sometimes attacks are looking for weak points to basically like pinpoint and say that's how we're going to break through the line. You know, maybe they're looking for a prop forward that they can run round. Maybe they're looking for a scrum half that's smaller than like an inside centre, and you're trying to create that matchup. But when there are no weaknesses, it just reduces the chance you're going to get through that line break. And I think we really saw that as a masterclass in defence by South Africa today. Every man on the field for South Africa had a responsibility from 1 to 15 to put in the tackles that stop the opposition at the gain line. Even Manie Libbok, who's, you know, a lot more known for his attacking rugby, that tackle that he made on Darcy Graham was not only so important and had to happen, but the technique was absolutely perfect to wrap up Darcy so he couldn't offload it for the try. So all in all, from 1 to 15, the defensive performance by South Africa was just sensational. It's so hard to break through that line. And yeah, as I said, as the second half went on, the scrums felt like they were less of a competition. It felt like Scotland were now just trying to get the ball out on their own ball rather than like trying to compete and get a penalty. The line out for Scotland was an issue all game. Again, that's part of the whole unforced error argument that I was making in terms of why Scotland didn't find themselves in a more competitive situation towards the end of the game with unforced errors. And yeah, I mean, hell of a game. More to see from both these sides in the future. But South Africa, really, this is kind of a very dominant performance, and is talking a lot about what I talked about in the power ranking show I made last week, that South Africa just have two engines, and one engine gets just a little bit tired at 60 minutes, the next engine just comes on, and you've got Manie and Libbok just bossing a great attack. So, wow, just sensational stuff. Can't wait to see more from South Africa, and the Scotland-Ireland game is going to be like a must-watch. It's going to be a sensational game. So that's it. Going to be moving straight on to Wales, Fiji. So I'll catch you on that video hopefully as well.
Illuminati confirmed.